EU leaders were all smiles as the Ukraine Recovery Conference got away in Gdansk. But the big announcement was left to Ukrainian Prime Minister Yuria Srividenko.
We have a great news. The first disbursement of 3.2 billion euro will be announced today. Applause.
The funds are aimed at stabilizing Ukraine's economy, strengthening its defense, and helping rebuild critical infrastructure, especially its damaged energy systems ahead of winter. European leaders say the investment underscores long-term support for Ukraine as the war with Russia goes on.
Requires massive investments today. If Ukraine continues to reform with the determination it has shown in the recent years, its place in the European family is becoming a reality.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said private investment would also be needed to rebuild Ukraine.
Public funding alone will never be enough to rebuild a country that has suffered such massive destruction. By investing now and committing long-term capital, Europe is sending a clear message. We believe in Ukraine's future within the European family.
And those investments have been pouring in. Srividenko says Ukraine expects to sign deals worth more than 10 billion euros at the conference. The conciliatory tone came despite a row between the Polish and Ukrainian presidents over World War II-era massacres. Neither one attended the conference, and it was up to the Polish Prime Minister to urge reflection.
Ukraine and its people want to be part of a united Europe. The condition for unification, for truly full and complete unification, has always been an understanding of one's own history and a genuine capacity, a real willingness for reconciliation.
For now, the message from Gdansk: rebuilding Ukraine starts now, with plenty of help from its friends.
And DW's Ukraine correspondent Nick Connolly told me more about the recovery conference.
I think, Sarah, this is a bit of a potpourri. There is something for everyone at this event. They have said that they're going to sign around 160 agreements. Some of those might be closer to a kind of memorandum of understanding than something really firm, but that's expected to be worth about 10 billion euros in total. There's that announcement, as you mentioned there, from the EU that the first billions would be flowing towards Ukraine from that 90 billion package that was announced some time ago. There's also announcements from various European countries of more defence aid and also involvement by Ukrainian companies, basically trying to look for international partners and investment. Some of that is definitely perspective for the future, for the time after a ceasefire. But some of that is also about keeping Ukraine's energy system afloat after all those attacks last winter. There's a platform there that is about finding the money to prepare also for what's expected to be next winter's destruction. It is pretty miraculous after all those attacks. You know, the power is back on here in Ukraine. The power cuts are over, and they're very keen to make sure that carries on, because that's obviously crucial to the warfare effort and obviously to business as well. So there's a lot of different things here, lots of different money and lots of different pots being kind of put onto the kind of press releases at once, but certainly this is basically the biggest event of the year in terms of Ukraine coming to European countries and countries from the rest of the world and saying, put your money where your declarations of support actually are and show that you really care and are willing to actually find some cash.
And Nick, it was announced today that the European Union has transferred the first tranche of a big loan to Kyiv. EU politicians, I mean, they seem keen to make this conference a success. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, certainly that was the 90 billion was basically the kind of lifeline for Ukraine after Donald Trump essentially switched off the tap on US help, right? When it was just not clear how this country was going to keep going, how it was going to pay pensions and salaries to soldiers at the front lines without US support, without US defense support, without maybe international lenders basically propping up the government. So that 90 billion was a giant kind of step for Ukraine. It obviously wasn't quite what they'd hoped. They'd hoped for a direct confiscation of Russia's frozen international assets, but that was basically the next best thing, and basically guarantees Ukraine's government's ability to keep going for this year and next year. So that is a big deal that money is now flowing, but there are also conditions being put to this money. The EU is not happy with some of the reforms or the lack of reforms here on the part of the government, so it's not like they're going to give that check in one go. But the fact that some of that money is flowing is a big relief, and also means that Ukrainians can know that their pensions are going to be paid, and that the government machine, however much missile attacks they're having to live with, the government machine here can keep on going.
And Nick, a row between Warsaw and Kyiv over World War II-era massacres is in the background of these meetings, which are taking place in Poland. Zelensky is not in attendance. How much is this overshadowing the conference?
Look, this obviously was very heated. You had lots of kind of angry exchanges both ways. You had those images doing the rounds on social media of Volodymyr Zelensky sending back the medal he'd been stripped of by his Polish counterpart, sending it by regular mail and posting that to social media. The fact that the Ukrainians pointed out that even Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator in Italy, hadn't been stripped of that award, but Zelensky had been. I think you can see it both ways. The kind of president in Poland, Nawrocki, his team say this is a humiliation for Poland and for Prime Minister Tusk, who's hosting this event. But Tusk and other people would say actually not having Zelensky there probably takes some of the temperature, some of the heat away from all those controversies. And if he were there, all the questions would be about those historical tensions between Poland and Ukraine, and they wouldn't be talking about money, about investment, about business.
Poland has been one of Ukraine's strongest military, humanitarian, political supporters since Russia began its full-scale invasion. How resilient is that partnership, Nick?
Well, certainly there are worries that these tensions, are kind of basically bringing to the fore quite how tenuous all of that is. And there is sociology, kind of polling from Poland to suggest that public opinion in Poland is shifting, that they're becoming more critical towards Ukrainian refugees, over 1 million of which have been in Poland since the beginning of this war, that there is increasing skepticism about the EU accession bid by Ukraine, that lots of people like farmers in Poland or truckers are scared about the competition that could come from Ukraine, exactly the same fears that people in Germany, for instance, had about Poland joining earlier 20 years ago or so. So there is a kind of worrying tendency there. But for now, it seems like that both sides have decided to kind of dial down on the rhetoric and to try and focus on the constructive stuff and leave the history to the historians, to the kind of civil society, and actually hopefully park this in a way that allows both countries to cooperate during this war. After all, it's not in Poland's interest to have Ukraine that is weakened, that has Russian troops close to their borders.
Nick Connolly, thank you.